Thank you very much, Kathy. Your Excellency, dear friends and colleagues, thank you all for being here in this very cold evening. On a personal note, before I start our presentation, I would like to express my gratitude to my co-presenter, Nina Kiparisi Apostolika, for the very generous and kind invitation to work together on this amazing site which we are going to present tonight. Koutroulou Magoula is a tell site situated in the southwest edge of the Thessalian plain, just west of the hills that form the northwestern end of the Othis mountain range. So you can see the location in relation to the mountains and the plain here, and two shots of the tell site in different times of the year. It is also 2.5 kilometers south of the modern town of Neomonastiri in Phthiotida. The site is part of a rich archaeological landscape in which dozens of Neolithic tells feature prominently. You can see the density of occupation, Neolithic occupation in the area. The abundance of prehistoric tell sites in the area between Domokos and Farsala was noted by researchers as early as the beginning of the 20th century. Weiss and Thompson mention a prehistoric site north of the village of Vardali, and they may well refer to Koutroulou Magoula. The mound is more explicitly mentioned by other, more recent researchers, such as Tsuknidas and Dimaki, who have also collected surface finds, mostly pottery and figurines. Systematic archaeological work on the site started in 2001 under the direction of Kiparisi Apostolika and continued in 2002, 2004, 5, 6, and 8 seasons. This work revealed a large, finds-rich habitation site dated primarily to the Middle Neolithic based on conventional pottery chronology. Its architectural features and material culture are characterized by unique elaboration and preservation. Informally since 2009 and more formally since 2010, work on site continued as part of the Koutroulou Magoula Archaeology and Archaeological Ethnography project, which is a collaboration between the Greek Archaeological Service and more specifically the Euphoria of Antiquities of Phthiotida and the Euphoria of Speleology and Paleoanthropology and the University of Southampton under the auspices of the British School at Athens. It is co-directed by Kiparisi Apostolika and myself. It is the results of the initial findings of this project which we are going to present to you today. This has been obviously a collective effort. We have relied on the dedication and hard work of a large number of colleagues, several of whom are here today and several of whom I'm going to mention below. Special thanks are due to our field director, Dr. Tom Laughlin. The excavation also operates as a field school, and dozens of undergraduate students and postgraduate students from the University of Southampton, but also University College London, University of Laval in Canada, and University of Melbourne in Australia have played an active role in this project. The main aims of this new project are, first, to understand the material and social life of a Mid-Neolithic community through the recovery and detailed study of architecture, artifacts, animal and plant remains, soil sediments, and other geoarchaeological and archaeoenvironmental data. Second, to study the embodied and sensorial ways through which this community produced material memory, place, time, and temporality. To investigate, in other words, its material and corporeal mode of social production and reproduction. Third, to situate this community in the broader social and physical landscape and compare its mode of material engagement with other communities nearby. And fourth, to study and understand the role and meanings of the material archaeological past and of archaeological practices amongst the present-day communities in the area through long-term, in-depth, and detailed archaeological ethnography. As part of this new project, a range of research activities was initiated, including topographical and surface survey of the tell, geophysical prospection, and stratigraphic excavation. The aim has been not only to answer the research questions of this new project, but also study and analyze the material found during the old excavations and prepare thus the whole site for publication. Our recording methodology is a combination of the single context system and of the narrative diary-based procedure traditionally used by the Greek Archaeological Service. The single context system, a modification of the one devised by the Museum of London Archaeology Service, is based on the definition and delineation of the smallest contextual and stratigraphic unit possible, and it is commonly used in both rescue and research excavations worldwide. As part of this project, we also introduced a range of analytical procedures such as radiometric dating, 3D visualization, soil micromorphology and phytolithic analysis, organic residue analysis, and zooarchaeological analysis. We also expanded and systematized procedures such as water flotation for archaeobotanical, microfaunal, and other studies. Further, it was decided that the whole deposit will be dry sieved. Moreover, perhaps the project is the first archaeology project in Greece which has been also from its inception an archaeological ethnography project. In other words, it recognizes that the understanding and study of contemporary local perceptions and attitudes towards the material past is as important as the study of its Neolithic and more broadly archaeological significance. Ethnographic research and various community-related activities acquired in our thought and practice a central role. This involved the collaboration of social anthropologists, but also of contemporary artists, and I'm going to mention several projects below. On the basis of the work carried out to date, Magoula reveals itself to be a tell 2,006 meters long and 182 wide, situated at 130 meters above sea level. So the red area here is the area that covers the geophysical survey. The green area is the area that covers the topographical survey, and the blue area is the area that we actually field walk. It's the pedestrian survey. It rises at 6.6 meters above the surrounding fields. With an overall area of 3.7 hectares, that is 37 stremata, Magoula is much larger, almost twice as large compared to most other tell sites in Greece, which according to the literature rarely exceed the 2 hectares. Almost half of the mound, the western half, the western part as you can see here on the slide, has been destroyed as a result of agricultural activity. Pedestrian survey revealed that occupation in the destroyed western part was more extensive than the eastern part of the site. The topographical survey led by Vasilis Tsamis also showed possible evidence for terracing and retaining walls on the north, east, and south side. More specifically, the mound was probably created having 3 levels of terracing, and it is highly likely that a retaining wall was present at least on the north side. Additional support for these topographical features was provided by the geophysical magnetometer survey conducted in 2012, the second geophysical survey on this site. The earlier geophysical project was a resistivity survey, and it was carried out in 2003. It did not, however, cover the whole Magoula, and its resolution was not fine enough to allow for detailed understanding of the site, as readings were taken in 1 meter intervals. Our new magnetometer high-resolution survey, with readings taken every 50 centimeters, provided some particularly significant results. This slide and the next one shows the actual results, which I'm going to analyze in a minute. And here, and in the next one, you see the interpretation of these results, with positive magnetic results shown in blue and negative magnetic responses shown in purple. According to our geophysics specialist, James Cole from the University of Southampton, the results indicate a significant number of subsurface anomalies. Discounting the geophysical signature to the extreme east of the survey area, that is these signs here and these here, which are probably reflecting modern activity, it is clear that there are a number of significant linear, rectilinear, and dipolar features present within the geophysics. From the results shown in this slide, there would appear to be several broad separations of the data. Given the time depth of human activity in the Magoula, however, the chronological association between these features will need to be investigated through excavation. What we see here is, in a sense, a flat image of everything. We need to establish their chronological connections. With this in mind, however, there are a series of strong linear, rectilinear, and dipolar features, P3 to P25, and N9 to N23, that is all these features here, which, through their close positioning, orientation, and signature, may be associated with the archaeological remains of buildings unearthed through excavation at the top of the Magoula. They thus may represent Neolithic buildings, or we can call them houses if you want. The second group, P28 and P42 and N26 and N47, belong to the earlier deposits located on the western part of the site, all these features here, where the site, as I just mentioned, has been heavily truncated due to modern farming activities. A third group of traces, P1, which is this one here, N6 to 8, N26 to N28, shows substantial linear, positive, and negative features. And are these features here, especially the circular features, I would like to emphasize. Our topographic survey had indicated the existence of terracing in this part of the Magoula, and we thus assume that P1 would be a retaining wall. A test trench investigation in 2012, however, did not confirm this assumption, but did offer stratigraphic indications of a U-shaped ditch, which had been recut as well. So it's this ditch here in section. Similarly, the remaining features of this third group may represent the building of terracing, retaining walls, and ditches to expand living space and to mark site boundaries. Indeed, a further test pit at the periphery of the Magoula offers stratigraphic and soil micromorphological indicators for the existence of a large perimeter ditch. The one on the top, and I'm going to show it here. So it's the ditch here, you can see, and the trench on the top. This trench aimed at investigating feature N7 and was located at the edge of the Magoula, 80 meters east of the summit, and provided evidence for a ditch 2.8 meters in width. It was excavated to a depth of 28 centimeters, but its full depth was not identified. It contained some pottery, and its soil micromorphological analysis showed water fluctuation and a significant presence of charred flakes. No distinct episodes of filling up could be ascertained, however, suggesting a slow process of infilling. In the future, we hope to carry out further stratigraphic and other analytical work in order to confirm with greater certainty the existence of these ditch features and investigate their nature and character. Go back to this slide. A further separation in the geophysical data would appear to be a number of linear and linear features in the southeast, which seem to offer a different signature in terms of signal and scale. You can see these being very, very different from the rest of the... This in turn may suggest that these anomalies may not be directly related to the activities of the Neolithic settlement, possibly relating instead to a later phase of occupation. But the features outlined above, and especially the ditches, dated mostly to the Neolithic based on the pottery found in them and on the position in relation to the excavated buildings, are of special social significance. They would have defined and delineated the area of occupation on the tell, producing at the same time, in social as well as special terms, a sense of collectivity. These and the terracing projects were more likely to have been substantial communal works, which would have required significant labor investment. Topographic and geophysical research combined, thus, offers us a picture of an elaborate and possibly communal reshaping of occupation space, as opposed to its accidental development as a result of household competition, as it is often assumed in the literature. These practices, however, which as we know now are fairly common in the Greek Neolithic but also in the broader European Neolithic, will be studied in detail later in the project through systematic excavation and other methodologies. To date, excavation at the top of the Magoula has unearthed cultural layers which reach at least 2.5 meters in depth from the surface of the tell. The coring, which was conducted in 2012, showed that these cultural layers reached further 2.5 meters in depth, that is 5 meters in total, which is not surprising given that the tell rises to 6.6 meters from the plain. This is the plan of the excavated buildings so far and the features. Now, 2 rectangular buildings have been unearthed in their entirety and several others only partially. Building 1, which was unearthed during the earlier excavations, preserves 2 or possibly 3 previous building phases, whereas the traces of a further, more recent Middle Neolithic phase were removed by the excavators in 2001 due to their fragmentary and partially destroyed state. Successive buildings were built on the same spot, often respecting the orientation of the previous ones, a well-known practice linked to ancestral ties and to material memory. Walls have stone foundations with mud bricks for the upper structure, but in some cases, such as in the earlier phase of Building 1, and the building earth in trench Zeta, Z, so again this is Building 1. Stone-made walls rise up to or exceed 1 meter in height, posing the possibility of buildings with entirely stone-built walls, which is unusual for the Neolithic. In some cases, such as in the building in trench Zeta, several building faces are visible on the same wall. At times, different faces use stones of different color and texture. You can see this very clearly here. For example, white, soft limestone versus gray, angular, and harder limestone, which would have been a distinctive aesthetic and sensorial impact, would have a distinct sensorial impact if left exposed. In buildings 1 and 2, it is more likely that beaten earth or mud-made floors were laid on the top of paved underfloor deposits constructed of small, flat, or semi-rounded stones. The appearance of these possible earthen floors, however, is highly fragmented and disturbed. Building 2, this one here, the largest building unearthed to date, measures 7.8 by 6.4 meters and sits on the highest point of the tell. Its stone foundations seem to have been protected by upright clay slabs. You can see them. It was almost empty of finds and had its southern wall completely removed. This wall here is completely removed, raising the possibility of deliberate destruction during the Neolithic. A layer of collapsed fabric was found only on the inside of the house, above the largely empty floor, strengthening our hypothesis of a deliberate destruction. Such a practice, a well-known practice from the Greek but also the Balkan Neolithic, is being called killing the house. The roofs of these buildings would have been supported by wooden poles, and for roofing, tree branches and other plant remains would have been used, covered by mud, several fragments of which, along with their plant imprints, have been found. Through the 3D reconstruction attempts, you can see some of these upper layers. Spaces between buildings seem to have been intensely used and included paved courtyards, perhaps partially roofed, judging by the post holes found. There were some elaborately constructed hearths with a concentration of figurines and cornerstones around them, and several pits. These open areas and the pits were extremely rich in finds, including pottery, eating remnants, and feasting paraphernalia in general. The richness of activity in the open or semi-open spaces between the buildings has been confirmed by the Lithic and micromorphological analysis, which has been carried out by Panagiotis Karkanas and Georgia Koromila. The samples were extremely rich in organic content, including animal dung, and it seems that animal penning in the courtyards was regularly practiced. In fact, even one of the most elaborately constructed buildings, this one in Trench Zeta, seemed to have been used for animal penning at some stage, or more likely, it seemed to have been a space shared by humans and other animals. But these activities were rotational and not constant through time. In some microlocales, we observed evidence for animal penning in one phase and for structures such as ovens in another. And talking of animals, based on our large animal bone assemblage, numbering more than 30,000 fragments from all seasons and analyzed by Kerry Harris, we can tell that the Neolithic inhabitants of Kutrelu Magoula kept primarily sheep and goat, which amount to over 70% of the sample, but also cattle and pig, whereas small quantities of dog were present. But they did also hunt, and small numbers of red deer and roe deer were found. In addition, they seem to have a particular taste for a river shell, the thick-shelled river mussel called in Latin Unio crassus, which they had to dig out of the sandy bottoms of the local river, according to Tatiana Theodoropoulou. Small quantities of it were found, and one shell seemed to have been used as a scraper for pottery or leather. Most bones come from the areas outside the buildings, confirming our general impression. The representation of species is especially variable, however, with some contexts, such as building in Trench Zeta, having higher concentrations of cattle, higher percentage of cattle, compared to sheep and goat, reminding us thus of the value of contextual analysis. In addition to meat, bone marrow was also valued, and bones were heated and then broken up to extract it. It is worth noting that in addition to the animal bones, a number of disarticulated and scattered human bones were also found amongst the Neolithic layers, which may indicate that the bodily remnants of their ancestors were circulating amongst the living in the spaces of daily routines. According to our archaeobotanist Georgia Gozamani, the Neolithic inhabitants of the site cultivated mostly einkorn and immerwheat, and less commonly barley and oat, but also lentils, peas, bitter veg, and grass peas, whereas fig seeds, terebinth, and elder were also found. They also used to collect a wide range of wild plants. In our current and future study of plant and animal remains, we intend to move beyond reductionist, subsistence-oriented models to emphasize not only the multiple interactions between humans and plants and animals, including the domain of consumption, but also the active role of these living entities and their agency. One of the most interesting categories of archaeological material from the site, which has already attracted wide interest, is the clay figurines. More than 300 of them have been already unearthed from all field seasons, and more than 2/3 of them were recovered from the new Synergasia project. They were found in many different contexts, including in wall foundations, and as in Achilleon, in at least one case, there was a concentration of them around the hearth. This corpus includes many figurine fragments and several clay cores, which offer valuable information on the technology of their manufacture. This body of material became the focus of a detailed study funded by the British Academy, which employs several methodological procedures. In addition to the systematic and multifaceted drawing and conventional photography, 1/3 of them were additionally recorded using 3D visualization techniques, most notably 3D scanning and photogrammetry. So some of the results of that project. And you can note here that this one seemed to be wearing a mask, so it's very apt and topical, I think. So this is a result of our photogrammetry work and some of the figurines that allows us to see it as a three-dimensional artifact. As we know, visualization is interpretation on its own, not a neutral and technical action. As such, these visualization procedures were carried out not in isolation, but by a team working together and engaging in a dialogue with each other and with a researcher who was carrying out the description and the database entry. In this process, several new insights emerged, which in their turn shaped the visualization policy. Furthermore, we were able to carry out ceramic petrography on 23 of them to detect possible circulation of figurines over long distances. In addition to its size, our figurine sample is extremely diverse. And while many well-known types are represented, there are several unusual ones which often challenge our conventions of calling these objects anthropomorphic figurines. So here are some examples, some of them that you would recognize as anthropomorphic, and some of them probably not, like this one, or this one, this one. There are some examples that merge human and animal, especially bird features, and others that resemble more fantastic beings. Most small-sized ones have been constructed using the technique of the central core, while for the larger ones, a composite technique with multiple cores seem to have been used. So 2 examples of these larger composite ones that preserve the torso. Many of them preserve not only plastic and in size, but also painted decoration, and even features of the attire are evident. And here is an example, and you can see in close-up here on at the back of the figurine the bands, the red bands that probably represent the attire, the dress, or the bodily decoration. And another one, and I don't know, you can make out the band here in X shape, and also the color here. Special emphasis was given by some makers to the hairstyles and to the headgear in general, which show an amazing variety. But what it emerges from our study is that figurines were constantly made and unmade. There are several cases of intentional fragmentation, but also of evidence of removing specific decorative features from the figurine body. In this one, for example, I don't know if you can make out, but you can see that the collar here, the band around the neck here, has been selectively removed. Human fingerprints have been detected on some of them, and we hope that their further microscopic study will provide information on the age of their makers. It's well known that in a number of contexts, children were responsible for making figurines, so we want to detect whether we are dealing with children here or with adults, for example. Our provisional petrographic results, carried out by Areti Pendedeka, show that most of the figurines analyzed were made of local clay. Only one figurine is characterized by compositional attributes which are incompatible with the local geology. It could possibly come from the area of Mikrothibes, about 40 kilometers to the east. Several clay models, clay house models, have been also found, which depict interesting architectural features, such as both flat and gabled roof, a central interior depression or hole, which may reference either hearth or a central post, and a hole in the roof as well. Several of them have holes in the roof. Our chipstone specialist, Tristan Carter, has found that of the roughly 800 chipstone artifacts recovered from all excavation seasons, over half were made of obsidian, the vast majority of which has the visual traits we associate with sources coming from the island of Milos. Precise attribution, however, would only be achieved through elemental characterization, a project that we aim to undertake in the near future. The assemblage was dominated by end products, mostly blades, and with very few cores. This limited quantity of nuclei, together with other features, indicates that obsidian was brought to the site in an advanced stage of reduction. It seems that the material must have entered the village in the form of prepared, if not part-worked, blade cores. Hereafter, the entire reduction sequence is attested on site. In that respect, the Magoula obsidian assemblage is quite typical of the Thessalian mid-Neolithic material. It has been suggested, most notably by Catherine Perles, that such regularity of the end product's form and scale, plus the common manner in which the cores were prepared, indicate that these communities were in fact linked by itinerant specialists rather than the obsidian being produced and worked by the local inhabitants. The remaining pieces of chipstone were made from a wide variety of siliceous materials. The second best represented lithic resource was that of red radiolarite outcrops, which are known from the Pindus Mountains, about 90 kilometers to the northwest. A number of such artifacts, mainly blades, show use wear that has been associated with harvesting cereals. But we can also associate such distinctive traces with cutting reeds and grasses from matting, basketry, fodder, or construction materials. Very few artifacts can be linked to hunting and to the processing of animal skins, a picture that confirms our zooarchaeological study. Chalcedony, which represents only 5% of the Magoula assemblage, conceivably originates from the outcrops around the mouth of the Strimonas River in the Rhodope Mountains that straddle northern Greece and also into Bulgaria, at least 240 kilometers linear distance to the northeast. The well-known honey flint is thought to have come from even further away on the Danube platform of northwest Bulgaria or southeast Romania. Such materials link Magoula to a wide range of geographically distant network of people and communities, through practices of exchange and gifting. Moreover, the sensorial and aesthetic properties and effects of these materials, as for example their particular color and shine, would have given them distinctive agency and meaning. Unlike cheap stone, our pottery Neolithic assemblage seem to have been more localized in nature, according to our specialists Stella Katsarou, Angeliki Kasnezi, and our petrographer already mentioned, Ariti Pendedeka. Petrographic analysis on both pottery and figurines has shown that most fabrics have a local origin, while some have affinities with other sites in the vicinity, and most notably with Achilleo. A variety of painted and monochrome styles and a combination of fine and coarse walls and textures are attested. Fine wares consist of painted pottery as well as red and buff monochromes, all bearing well-modified, even lustrous surfaces. Coarse, thick-walled vessels have plain or roughly treated surfaces of buff, red, red-brown, and black color. In general, most painted pottery belongs to the red on white group, whereas a lower percentage belongs to the white on red, according to the categories proposed by Weiss and Thompson. Other painted classes are relatively rare. In that sense, Cuterloo Magoula fits well with the cultural kaini for this period. In terms of shapes, fine groups, painted and monochromes, particularly involve cups, bowls, and bases of various profiles, but also neck globular jars. Coarse ware involves an even broader collection of profiles in terms of depth and sizes. In terms of manufacturing techniques, fine painted and monochrome vessels are probably coil-formed, something which is supported by some petrographic samples. Painted and monochrome surfaces were burnished. Brush, scrape, or polish marks have mostly survived on the interior of the pot. Careful observation of filling and painting instances testifies to a variety of paint brushes available to the potter and revealed the effort and the skill to manage the arrangement of an ornamented surface. From the initial assessment and across the site as a whole, it seems that the very elaborate serving or tableware vessels, such as cups, bowls, and basins, predominate, and in some contexts are over 70% of the assemblage, indicating the role of pottery in rituals of public commensality and feasting. Coarse containers belong to the medium deep size, ranging in diameter from 7 to 34 centimeters, and are more commonly between 20 and 25 centimeters. They were probably to do with the storage and transportation of foodstuffs, but also with cooking and serving meals. We should also mention that a large number of perforated sherds, commonly identified as strainers, have been found. And in other Neolithic contexts, these objects have been linked to the manufacture of secondary animal products and cheese making in particular. We intend to investigate this further through organic residue analysis. Finally, a number of monochrome and painted miniature vessels, known as offering tables, were found, mostly in fragments, and with decorative features which are at times imitating human body parts, and especially legs. They seem to have been intentionally fragmented and are more likely to have been ritualistic. A few pottery vessels preserve some plastic anthropomorphic features such as human faces, or resemble, as in this case, fantastic creatures. For example, this one, we don't know what it actually represents. It looks like a frog, or it could be something else, but it is a miniature vessel with a fantastic being as a shape. Petrographic analysis has shown that the majority of the samples, regardless of fabric or surface treatments, were fired in temperatures below 800 degrees in an oxidizing or mixed atmosphere, pointing thus to open or pit firing conditions. Contextual analysis is still in progress, but it seems that the vast majority of vessels linked to food and drink serving and consumption come from outdoor spaces, either primary context or secondary refuse context, such as pits, which are also rich, as we mentioned, in organic material and other food remnants. So this picture is consistent with a pattern of convivial and communal eating and drinking in the spaces between the buildings, which seem to have been a major area of sociality for the Neolithic inhabitants of Kutrulu. As for the broader cultural and stylistic references of the assemblage, it seems that it belongs to the Western Thessalian tradition and can be conventionally dated on stylistic grounds to the middle and the second half of the Middle Neolithic. Yet, what does this chronological attribution mean in absolute terms? And how does it actually relate to the other Neolithic sites in the region, especially the ones which have become the type sites for this period? As part of our project, we carried out a pilot program of radiocarbon dating, and we hope to expand this in the future as we work our stratigraphic sequence. When, a few weeks ago, we received our results, which were processed by the Chronicle laboratory and calibrated and interpreted by Yorgos Fakorelis, we were surprised. As can be seen from the slide, with the exception of a sample that comes from a disturbed context with Bronze Age activity, the one on the top, all 6 samples give dates which fall within the first 2 centuries of the 6th millennium BC. Culturally, we are accustomed to consider this as the period of a transition from the early to the middle Neolithic. So there is a discrepancy here between the chronology of the pottery and the chronology of our C14 samples. The other interesting feature is that the average time difference between the deepest sample in the sequence, the one taken from a depth of about 5 meters from the trench surface, and the one only 20 centimeters from the surface, the difference is just 150 or 170 years. And in fact, you can see the clustering here. Irrespective of whether this represents real-time difference as opposed to the usual expected deviation, this close clustering of dates, which are stratigraphically so far apart, makes Kutrulu Magoula a rather short-lived site within the time frame of the Neolithic. How can we explain this apparent disparity between the conventional pottery typological dating and the radiocarbon dating? This is a question which will occupy us for the years to come, the months and the years to come, and the one which requires the coordinated effort of researchers from many different sites across the region and beyond. For the moment, it will suffice to say that recent research on the Greek Neolithic and also the European Neolithic has revealed extreme regional diversity and has also led to a series of reconsiderations, including the revisions in established dating sequences, as well as the statistical refining of dating down to a generation. I have in mind, for example, the Gathering Time project on the British Neolithic enclosures and the follow-up project called Times of Our Lives. We hope that in the future we'll be able to correlate such precise dating up to a generation with individual building phases and other construction activities, allowing us thus to explore further issues of social memory, ancestry, and temporality. But the site of Kutrulu Magoula continue being an important mnemonic locale in the post-Neolithic periods, and it was revisited, it seems, primarily for burial purposes. Here, we'll make reference to 2 such moments for which we have impressive material traces. The first is the late Bronze Age. Pottery from this period was found in the upper layers of the earliest trenches opened in 2001, but it was in the seasons of 2011 and 12 which we encountered and excavated fully a small late Bronze Age, so-called Mycenaean tholos tomb, complete with its dromos. The tomb was found largely empty, save for a few sherds, and it seems to have been looted in pre-modern times. The maximum diameter of its chamber is 2.65 meters. Its walls survive to 6 centimeters in height, and at places show signs of corbelling. The dromos walls survive to a length of 4 meters and a height of 35 centimeters. According to one of our pottery specialists, Eleni Frusou, the earliest pottery from the dromos and the chamber places the circular structures in the late Helladic 2B, or even in the late Helladic 2A period, which is a high date, of course, for a Mycenaean tholos tomb, based on our knowledge of the first appearance of these tombs in late Bronze Age Greece. Now, these sherds, however, could belong to an earlier deposit, which was disturbed when the structure was built. Alternatively, this early pottery could have been still in circulation at the time of the tomb's construction in the late Helladic 2B. Its use must have been lasted at least until the late Helladic 3A1 or late Helladic 3A2, as the latest Mycenaean pottery found shows. If this tomb was built in late Helladic 2B, then it belongs to a small group, to a small number of the earliest examples of such funerary architecture, of such funerary monuments known to us in Mycenaean Thessaly, but also in the Mycenaean mainland as a whole. It is worth noting here that the whole deposit of this context was processed through water flotation, and we hope that this sorting of the residue will provide further clues regarding its use and role as a monument. In 2011, we encountered the second substantial material evidence for post-Neolithic funerary practices on the Magoula. An inhumation containing a complete skeleton, which according to our human osteologist Eleni Stravopodi, belongs to a young woman between 25 and 35 years old, buried, as you can see, in extended position. The burial was found at 2 meters east of Building 2 and at the depth level lower than the stone foundations of that Neolithic structure. So it seems to have disturbed Neolithic layers, judging also by the pottery. There were no artifacts accompanying the skeleton, but the body itself seemed to have been enveloped by a rectangular, soft, and disintegrating limestone formation which surrounded and covered the skeleton. I don't know if you can make this here. This is most likely to have been plaster material used to construct the grave, judging by its overall shape. No clear cut was visible in the inhumation, suggesting that the tomb may have been above ground. The skeleton was radiocarbon dating to 1040 to 1220 AD, a find that complements earlier finds such as a 12th century AD coin and abundant medieval pottery found especially in these parts of the excavation around this burial. We want to finish with our various archaeological, ethnographic, and public and community archaeology activities. Our archaeological ethnography was a team effort. The social anthropologist Aris Anagnostopoulos for the 2009 season, pilot season, and Kostas Kalantsis for the following seasons played a central part and central role in this collective endeavor. The main town is the town of Neo Monastiri, and it's inhabited mostly by people who descend from the region of Kavakli in Thrace, which is known in the Greek national narrative as Anatoliki Romilia. In the 1920s, during the exchange of populations in the Balkans, they resettled in this area, initially at a village which was destroyed by an earthquake in 1954. The present-day village was built at the foothill of the mostly Hellenistic Acropolis of Proerna, the most imposing and the only organized and accessible archaeological site in this area. So this is the Acropolis here. The inhabitants of Neo Monastery still emphasize their distinctive identity compared to the other villages in the region, and they organize frequent celebratory events where the dances and the songs of Anatoliki Romilia are performed. Our ethnography has shown that the relationships to the material past is extremely interesting and multifaceted. Some of them have formed an association of Friends of Antiquities, initially founded to promote the Proerna site, and more recently resurrected to help and facilitate our project. Their discourses and practices are often close to the official archaeological discourses, and they often read archaeological literature. Others, however, who have a more direct and intimate relationship with the land, project their own indigenous archaeology, which foregrounds a discourse about treasures and, in general, things hidden underground, which can be revealed through various embodied techniques, including through dowsing. Rhabdoscopia. This perception merges mythological with historical time, and the distant past with more recent traumatic past, such as the Second World War and the Civil War. The most valorized archaeological sites in the area until the beginning of our project were Proerna, but also the artificial mount of Tapsi here in the middle of the village. Despite a very large number of Neolithic tales in the area, they seem to attract relatively little public attention, save for some pioneering efforts by local teachers and amateur archaeologists who had collected surface finds and published some articles, but also helped establish the archaeological collection of Neo Monastery. This relative disinterest, however, changed in recent times, in recent years, following our archaeological and ethnographic projects. Our open meetings with the local community were very well attended, and the regular school visits were very successful. But there was one specific activity that is worth mentioning in that respect: our theater archaeology program, which was carried out primarily by our collaborator, the archaeologist and actor Eftimis Theou. This involved his active participation in all stages of the excavation and ethnography, as well as the writing of a play inspired by the archaeological finds and the ethnographic information. The play was then performed at the end of the season, on site and next to the open trenches, and it was attended by hundreds of people from the local communities. 2 plays were written and performed so far. In 2011, the theme of the play was the feast. In 2012, the theme was the house. The plays touched upon themes that are central to both Neolithic and more broadly prehistoric social life, but also contemporary local concerns, such as the role of communal and convivial eating and drinking ceremonies, and the role of the house as the embodiment of family ties and ancestral links. The plays, this is the second one, the plays combine dramatized monologues, singing, and other formats, and the scripts merge information on our archaeological finds with ethnographic data and even local stories and food recipes. The feast in particular had a long and successful life beyond our project and the excavation itself. It was performed at 2 restaurants here in Athens and also at Rethymno, and it became a contemporary art installation at the National Museum of Contemporary Art in Athens, as well as an educational program for schools. Both stage performances on site ended with live music, by local musicians and dancing, where various dances belonging to different traditions were performed, from the Thracian dances of Neomasteriotes to the local dances of indigenous Thessalian people. The site of Kudrelou Magoula is fast becoming thus not only an important archaeological locality, which forces us to rethink many of the long-established archaeological certainties, but also a site of cultural production, a multi-temporal arena of various encounters, a lively space of fruitful and creative interaction for archaeologists, other scholars, and people from many communities. Thank you very much for your attention.